Hello, and welcome to the first episode of season 5. We're in a slightly different environment today because we've been kindly hosted by our friends at Nicoz Diamond in their auditorium in the CBD of Harare. It's a welcome change, gentlemen.
Very refreshing. Quite like the auditorium. Yeah.
Yep.
So
I feel kind of.
And we have a crowd as well.
Yes, and we've got a studio audience. Some beautiful smiling faces on the other side, mostly.
And you thought it best to wear a t-shirt?
Well, in case I forgot why I was doing this, I thought I'd remind myself. And just to show people that, there's another side of me.
Or that nobody cares about you.
Well, actually, there is a person who cares about me who made this t-shirt.
All right, okay.
So I think she'll take great offense.
Are they paying for this?
Well, I didn't say the name.
Okay.
I'll have a fight with Ranga afterwards.
Oh.
There's a lot on the table today. Is this because of the different location?
I think so.
We must start with the nonsense that you bring.
It's
What shrubs are you heating up today?
Okay. If it's nonsense, then I don't know what you guys are taking. But it's English fine tea. It's afternoon tea. I'm looking forward to it. It's a glorious afternoon in Harare. Winter of Harare. I mean, it's still warm. It's not as cold as one would expect. Yeah, so looking forward to this.
Yeah, okay. Not as boring as usual, but we'll take it. What are you having, George?
I ask the questions.
Sometimes.
Well, anyway, as usual, well, not as usual, but as I often do, I'm a great fan of the 16 Men of Tain. So I'm having what I think many people now know as one of my favorites, the Glenmorangie 10, the original.
And you're gonna have it with ice, or you're gonna have it on the rocks?
I'm gonna have ice.
Yeah,
We've been doing this for 4 seasons. By now, you should know.
So your question was, you're going to have it with ice, or are you going to have it on the rocks?
No.
Well caught.
Sorry, I meant to ask
Even I know the difference.
You're learning. This is good. Yeah, I wanted to find out whether he's going to have it with ice or not. I actually was going to have what George asked George to get whiskey, and I didn't know what he was going to bring, and I wasn't particularly excited about having the Glenmorangie. So I decided.
There's one who always has a bottle in your boot.
Well, I didn't get this from my boot, but I'm having brandy today. This is South African. It's not any of the more glamorous French cognacs we've had, but it's just as good. It's great value, actually. The KWV 10-year-old, and as always, I'm going to have it neat to start, and I'll dilute as the show goes on.
Great. Cheers.
So why are you having it in the same whiskey glass?
We just weren't organized about glasses.
We're not in our home bar.
All right.
So over the past few weeks, we've seen prices going up, not only in Zim dollars, but in US dollars. I mean, I don't think in our lifetimes we've ever seen fuel at the prices it's at, $1.70, almost $1.80 per liter. The price of bread is, I don't eat bread, but I hear it's quite high, applies right across the economy. How do we end up in this situation? I thought US dollar prices were supposed to be stable.
Well, there is global inflation. Well, should we say there's inflation in the US, and also the US dollar has been strengthening against all the other major currencies, and that has led to general prices going up. But I wish to correct you there, and we need to be very specific. The idea that oil prices are going up, oil prices go up all the time. In fact,
not to this extent.
No, in 2014, they were more or less around the same prices that they are at the present moment per barrel, right? And that's the distinction between an increase in prices and a general increase in prices. So inflation is the general prices increasing. But the idea of isolated prices actually increasing has been with us since time immemorial. But at this particular moment in time, there is inflation. There's a general price increase. It means it's not just fuel, but it's prices right across. On average, they're increasing. And we saw in America, 40-year high inflation, 8.6%. and we saw the Fed coming into the market and actually increasing an unprecedented increase in interest rates, which was 75 basis points. That's 0.75.
Three quarters of 1%.
Of 1%, but that's the highest they've ever increased in 30 years, right? And the expectation was 0.5, but this came at 0.75. That just tells us the outlook that the Fed has.
What level have they taken the interest rates to?
To 1.75%.
So interest rates at 1.75, inflation is at
8.6%.
Depending on who you believe. But inflation is much higher.
Yeah, it is.
But just to chime in a little bit, from a Zimbabwean perspective, it's not just that we're affected by high US inflation. We are particularly sensitive to the costs of certain commodities. So because we're a net importer, so because of high inflation in general, and because of these specific commodities that we are vulnerable to, we've seen the prices of a lot of these things go up in a way which is not true in other parts of the world. You
think there's other parts of the world that are not feeling the same?
Yeah,
that we are?
Absolutely. Yeah. Switzerland, inflation in Switzerland is 2.5%. Japan is 2.4%. Saudi is actually less than 2%. So there are many countries that are not experiencing high inflation.
So it's a composition of the basket used to measure inflation?
No, it's a direct result of inflation. Remember what Milton Friedman said
like
continuously.
You and him
no. I think
the rocks on ice.
I think it's a direct result of the amount of money that you printed. Inflation always.
Because of the currencies.
Well, not currencies. Let's not confuse matters. Within a particular country, if the US has been printing money, then we expect inflation to be higher. If Switzerland has not been printing money, if China has not been printing money, if Saudi Arabia has not been printing money, then we don't expect inflation
in their currency.
Yeah, but I know Rufaro has got a different view, so you might want to hear what Rufaro thinks about that.
No, I tend to agree with your assessment. I think where we differ, and we're at risk of getting into a rabbit hole, is why inflation.
I will not allow.
Where we differ is why inflation in the US is high. He thinks it's mostly to do with printing. I think it's mostly to do with supply side shocks. So okay, that's a different conversation.
I will let you guys have a few minutes on that. Okay, I mean, he's spoken ad infinitum about printing. Tell us about supply side shocks.
So if you think about it, just to put some context, if you look at the US in particular, over the last 10 years, they've increased broad money supply by about 126%. They had about $10 trillion in broad money supply 10 years ago, and they have 22 trillion today. That's an increase of about 126%. But the inflation over that same period is not comparable to the growth in broad money supply. The inflation, if you look at the CPI index over the last 10 years, it's only up 26%. So the high inflation figures in the US are not driven entirely by money supply growth. There are other factors at play. And if you look at, because of the war in Ukraine and the supply shocks that came out of the COVID crisis, you saw a whole bunch of commodity prices spike, and things like shipping and computer chips. And those have had a bigger impact on US inflation, in my opinion, than printing.
So you think it'll all go away?
I don't think it'll all go away. I think for as long as you have those supply chain challenges and constraints, those prices are going to remain high, and you're going to have high inflation.
But now the ships are moving around. Now the ships are moving. The mines are going again, so the price of chips will normalize, and then it'll all go away. Prices might even come down.
Yes, that's my view. I reckon in the next 12 to 18 months, as the supply chain challenges unwind, the prices are going to pull back. In fact, you're going to see gluts, because whenever there's a squeeze and prices go to record highs, there's a lot of investment in additional capacity. And it almost inevitably leads to a glut where there's just too much inventory and not enough demand to support it, and the prices then reverse.
In the same way that at the beginning of COVID, you could buy a mask for $5 or something crazy like that, and so many people started importing them. Now supermarkets even give them for free.
Exactly, so that sort of thing. But he's got a different view. He thinks it's less to do with supply chain challenges. It's more to do with printing.
Well, absolutely. And I will make the two distinctions, and which we can agree on, is if you say it's a supply chain phenomena, you're the accountants, so you'll be able to read
Neither
into
of us has passed a debit or a credit for a decade. So
Doesn't
can you
matter.
stop calling us accountants?
Doesn't matter. What I mean is you at least may have an understanding of the fundamentals, the easy fundamentals of debits and credit, right?
I get the sense he's about to pontificate.
Well, not precisely, but you know, just think about it. If you're saying it's a supply chain problem, then it's a zero-sum game. So if we take money out of that equation, then if the price of one commodity is going up, then it means somebody on the other side is coming off.
Something else must come down.
No,
He's got a point.
Really?
Yes, because the amount of money hasn't increased. So if we're spending more on computer chips,
it means you're spending less on something else.
No, but when you put together your CPI basket, right? If the price of one item that weighs 10% goes up 100%, for example, then that's going to have an impact on your CPI, notwithstanding what's happening with your money supply, right?
Mathematically, yes, and that's the point, right? So mathematically, if you say that it's got nothing to do with money supply,
I'm not saying it's got nothing to do with money supply.
Okay, so you.
I'm saying no. I'm saying that supply chain shocks have an impact on inflation, and I think their input to inflation in this instance is higher.
It's obviously and I forgive you. You're an accountant, so you may not understand what inflation is. And
I'm not an accountant.
Okay, whatever you studied.
I used to be.
I identify as an economist.
Okay, all right.
I don't think you should say that now.
But anyway, let's backtrack, because I know a lot of people have these problems. So we need to ensure that people understand. Just because a price of a good has gone up does not necessarily mean that the general price levels have gone up.
Agreed.
Right? So when you say supply chain, you're really looking at goods that are in the supply chain. And just because goods in that particular supply chain, for example, oil, has gone up. So right now, oil per barrel is around 120, somewhere there. In 2014, it was around 120.
Yep.
But the general price level was not at 8.6%, right? So just because a particular good has gone up does not mean the general price levels have gone up. That's one distinction that you need to keep in mind. Then the second distinction that you need to keep in mind is when people talk about CPI, they're talking about a proxy of inflation. CPI is not inflation. It's a proxy. What we mean by proxy is it's trying to calculate, it's trying to assume, it's trying to assume what inflation is. And it's trying to assume what inflation is as far as the consumer is concerned. But the consumer is not the only individual within an economy. That's why when he's talking about 26% increase, that there's been a 140% increase in money supply, but CPI has only gone up by 26% over the last 10 years. Well, that's true, right? But look at another proxy of inflation, which is asset inflation. So let's look at a good proxy of asset inflation is the equity market. Also, how much is the equity market gone up?
The stock exchange, normal people.
Yeah, the stock exchange, NASDAQ and whatever. How much is that gone up over the same period? So the real reason why CPI and why everybody is concerned this time around, it's not to say that in 2008 and 2009 or 10 years ago, there was no inflation. But the only reason why people are concerned now is because it's actually affecting the largest majority, the voters. So CPI affects everybody. Why? Because when the cash injection that went into the market after COVID, that went directly, those paychecks went directly to the consumer. So that's why everybody's feeling inflation. But it does not necessarily mean that in 2008 there was no inflation. There was no CPI inflation, but there was certainly asset inflation.
This is a simple accountant here.
Yeah.
And explain to people what CPI is. It's a consumer price index, which is roughly a measure of household spending.
Yeah, so look, you haven't said anything I disagree with. When I talk about supply chain challenges, I'm not talking about one or two commodities, because when you look at container shipping, right, a lot, 80-90% of physical goods consumed globally spend some of their life cycle in a container ship. So if the cost of containers and shipping goes up, it affects the cost of pretty much every physical good in the economy. When you look at the...
But if you fix the amount of money, what happens?
Okay, look, I think we are going down a rabbit hole now. So look, the point is, we agree that global prices are going up. You think that it might be what...
In certain countries.
Okay. In US dollars.
Switzerland inflation is 2.5%. Okay. Japan, it's 2.4.
Okay. Agreed. But I think we're talking about a US dollar context, and let's keep it simple. In a US dollar context,
which is more relevant to us here anyway, because we...
Yeah. No more brandy for you. The prices are going up. You think that it's passing? You think it's going to be with us for a while, as long as...
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, right.
So when you look at business cycles, why it's critical to then study what the Fed is doing, because that would tell us whether this is going to be with us for a very long time, or, as everyone is now predicting, we're going to see a recession. So what happens is the Fed initially misshot. They did not know what they were doing, and they left it for too late. So now they're increasing interest rate. Now, when you increase interest rate, immediately what's going to affect, it's going to affect everybody who's leveraged. And a lot of people...
Everybody who's got a loan.
Who's borrowed. And that means almost everybody. So when you look at your mortgage rates, that's going to increase. And when that increases, we expect a recession. And a recession is classified as two quarters, negative growth in 2 quarters. So
the economy is going to shrink.
Well, that's why he's there. So what we really need to watch is what the Fed is going to do. Now, the Fed is doing the right thing right now.
In your view?
In my view, or in almost, I think everybody. I don't know if Rufaro differs.
Yeah, I agree.
But we want to see more of that. So we are expecting that the Fed rate should get up to 4-5%. And only when it gets to 4-5%, then immediately we're going to go through a recession. But that's not a bad thing. So a recession is just a correction. There was just too much money that we printed. So we go through a recession. It's like when you go through a fever, right? It's not a bad thing necessarily, but
unless
it just means that unless it kills you.
And ask every mother of an infant if they agree with you.
But it's just a correction. It's just the body. It's just a way in which the body is just correcting in terms of your temperature. So similarly with an economy, that when an economy overheats, we expect a cooling off period. Now, this is where we differ, or where economics differ, where you have different schools of thinking.
We're not going down that rabbit hole right now, are we?
No. But I think it's very important that at least a lot of people watch the Fed and what the Fed is going to do. Now, if the Fed does not increase interest rates aggressively as they should, then we're expecting that the recession will turn into a depression. So a much longer
It'll shrink by more for a longer time.
But if they are aggressive in the short term, then we expect that there will be a recession. But after that, then the economy will get back to its long run path.
If you've got a cancerous patient early on in their cancer, you either open them up early and cut it out, or delay it, and then you're going to have much more aggressive treatment for a longer period in a later stage.
You've put it better than I would have ever done. So well done, George.
Yeah, I am an accountant. Look, this might be a very good place for us to take a break. It's heavy stuff. It's maybe a little bit worrying, a little bit depressing for us normal people. He says it's not. But we'll be back in a couple of minutes. And we're back. Have you powdered your nose?
No, that's
Oh,
Tinashe's
sorry.
question.
Have you powdered your nose?
Yes, I have, George.
It still looks shiny. So-
Where's the makeup lady?
And is your bladder suitably relieved?
Suitably.
Okay. So we went to the break on what I thought was a really dour note. Tinashe thinks the economy is going to correct. I don't think Rufaro disagrees.
Yeah, I agree.
The global economy is in for a rough landing unless the Fed does something drastic. But look, we know from past experience there will be some sort of bumpy landing. If we don't, we're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
There will be a bumpy landing eventually. But let's come back home. So you talk
Where
about
you belong.
Yes. Let's come back to Zimbabwe. So I mean, the Fed increases interest rates 8%. Oh no, 0.75%. Inflation there is 8%.
8.6.
The local housewife, the local person at the bottom of the pyramid, has experienced a bottle of cooking oil going from a little over $4 to $5.50 over the last couple of years. Show me how 8% in America becomes 20 or 30% here. Show me what I can do to protect myself.
I think this way I agree with Rufaro.
Yeah, it's going to get much worse for us, actually. It's the reason why some of these prices in Zimbabwe tend to go up much higher than in international markets is because we are such a tiny consumer. So when there's a global shortage, the big players get the first dibs to the available inventory of whatever the commodity is, and then the world's smallest and poorest countries then get into a bidding war for whatever's left. So if
So there's 100 bags of maize. America takes 70.
well,
There's 100 bags of
between the
maize.
Americans, the Europeans, and the Chinese, they probably take 95% of it.
But the world, if I may continue, there's 100 bags of maize. The world needs 103. The big guys take 95. Everybody else is left to fight for 5, but we know that 3 guys aren't going to get. So you're saying then the price doesn't go up by 3%. It goes up by a lot more because
It goes up exponentially.
the next guy who's just below the big guys says, well, I'm not going to bid what I should for one. I'm going to bid double for my one. And that puts up the whole price.
Yeah, so we're just getting started, unfortunately, because if you think about it, the war in Ukraine started on the 24th of February. So
It's
that's
supposed to last 3 weeks.
yeah, but we're looking at about what 110, 112 days, and typically, if you are consuming a physical good that was imported, it was probably paid for 90 to 120 days ago.
Yep.
So if the price changes, if the price changed on the 24th of February, we would only start feeling it round about now. And some of these prices went up significantly in March, in April. So we are yet to see the worst of these increases. And some of the commodities that are affected, for example, cooking oil, which you referenced, Ukraine is the largest exporter of sunflower oil, right? And I suspect they have a bit of challenges with their production right now. And
They should be in the middle of their summer crop right now. But I don't imagine there's many farmers out there tending to their sunflowers.
Yeah, and the little that they have produced, they've got issues shipping it out of the country because there's a blockade on their ports. So definitely there is a severe shock in terms of the supply of these things out of Ukraine that's going to affect the global market. And because we're a small, poor player in that market, we're going to get the worst of it.
I think I partly agree with what Rufaro has said, but I think that there will be a natural response to that, which is we just consume less. So if we were consuming 100 bags of maize, then
That's so simple.
we just,
I could just tell my kids not to have sandwiches tomorrow.
well, not exactly, but look at the statistics. We consume more maize meal than Zambia and Malawi, who are poorer states than us. right? So the natural...
No, but they have a more... they have a bigger variety in their diet.
Well, even if when you look at the variety, we consume more food than Zambia and Malawi, whatever it is. And part of it is because we are more subsidized.
I'm not sure about that.
No, it's, you can verify it. In terms of food consumption, we actually consume more food than they do. And what should happen is we should just adjust. It's just how you adjust your fuel, right? So, your fuel consumption.
Again, I must tell my kids that they must have less sandwiches.
No, they're no longer going to Kariba on holiday. It's simple and straightforward.
What does Kariba have to do?
Well, your fuel consumption has been increasing because, well, you go on holiday or wherever. So what I'm just saying is that in the world economics, so while I agree with Faro, the general economic view is that prices and the demand for those prices should adjust. But the big problem, which you cannot adjust, which is what we are inheriting or what we're importing from...
No, we're not going to let you just go over that because we're people. And I like going to Kariba. I like drinking whiskey. And you're telling me I must have less now?
It's obvious. Whether you want to or not, you just won't have enough money in your pocket. I mean, it's basic and straightforward.
So basically what he's saying is we're going to get poorer and our quality of life is going to deteriorate.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
Naturally. No, I'm saying that's a natural reaction. That's a natural reaction, right? You just don't have the money. You know,
or we could all put pressure on the government to make a plan.
Where does the government find the money?
I don't know. Where's they found it before?
There's just no money.
Where's the government found it before?
Well, inflation tax. But let's not get into that. I think I want to, you know what? I want to dip into the conversation by saying that what we're really importing, which we cannot change, are our past sins. And our past sins is debt. So when the US dollar is strengthening, because what the Fed is doing is that the US dollar is strengthening. Now, unfortunately, for you to service your US dollar debt, it's just going to be more expensive today than it was.
But how is that relevant for Zimbabwe? We've been in arrears and default, so we're not servicing any debt. We don't pay our debt anyway. So, you know, it doesn't...
Okay. It actually does.
This is like City of Harare putting up its rates when you have absolutely no intention of paying them.
No, it's not that. But a lot of our companies do hold US dollar debt, and government does pay and service its US dollar debt, some of its US dollar debt.
And where I agree with Tasha, the government's numbers just look that much worse and make it that much harder for them to borrow. But also an important thing is when American interest rates go up, or when interest rates in the developed world go up, it makes us even less attractive for investment.
There's a flight to quality.
So when their rates are low, there's some people out there who say, well, I'll take a risk on Zimbabwe. I'll take a risk that they'll take my farm. I'll take a risk that they'll change the law on currency because the return is that much better than back home. Mm-hmm. But as the return back home improves, the less attractive it is to go to a little country that announces massive economic policy changes on Saturday nights.
But I don't know that, again, I don't know that this affects us. It's not like there was a queue of foreign money on the door trying to get into Zim.
So all our fuel is on LCs.
All our fuel, all our fertilizer.
All our fuel, fertilizer, everything.
That's a letter of credit. That's somebody somewhere out there who's saying, I'll give you fuel, pay me after 3 months. I'll give you fertilizer, pay me after 3 months. I'll give you rice, pay me after 3 months.
Yeah,
even our maize.
Yes.
You know, we haven't been self-sufficient in maize for 2 decades. Even our maize comes.
I hear you, George, but I think that I think that so yes, those structures are there, but I suspect very much that they're very different from Zambia or Malawi in that our structures are much closer to cash. They're much more collateralized because we don't have credit.
We actually still
at a national level in a meaningful way.
It's come down, but we still do. But this is the important thing, Rufaro. When you go back to pre-bond note days, our corporations in this country were on open account with international suppliers. That means if you are running a business here manufacturing widgets and you had a supplier
Yes, they'll deliver and they would expect you to pay in 60 days or 90 days. They don't do that anymore. They've learned.
And they've just tightened and tightened and tightened. So it went from 60 to 30 to cash.
So it's very close to cash.
And it's going to go to prepayment. And it's just going to go to, but why
we don't want to do
why do we
business
deal with you guys
again? Yeah, it's too hard.
Yes.
But for fuel, we still have letters of credit.
And for cooking oil. And for most of the food items.
We actually still have
letters of credit.
Yeah, but there, I think what's at the back of that LC is the collateral that is very close to cash.
No. A lot of them are still on the...
Because why would... A
lot of them are still because they trust the local bank. Some of them, believe it or not, are cash covered in Zim dollars.
Okay, those are Einsteins.
No, it works because they still believe that if the Reserve Bank says something, at least within a period of X number of weeks, that promise is good.
And if that closes, the economy will constrict even further. That's all we're arguing.
Okay, yeah. So we're on the same page. It's looking. Yeah. It's not looking great.
Yeah.
It's looking abysmal.
Yeah, we should drink to that.
No, I don't think we should drink to that. Okay, but I mean, okay, so that's what's coming from outside the country. But this thing's happening here, right? So Minister of Agriculture is suddenly saying, we must run around and import 300,000 tons of maize. But we're in the middle of the harvest. Why are we running around and doing that? And what's that going to mean?
It's a bad time to be a net food importer. And
is it ever a good time to be a net food importer?
Dubai is a net food importer. Saudi Arabia is a net food importer.
It is. If you're Saudi.
Yeah, but Saudi it's a desert.
Yes, but they're okay.
Yeah. Oh no, Israel is a desert.
Yeah, but they've got oil and Israel's got Tel Aviv with all these amazing tech companies that you can't compare the two.
Israel's got nothing.
Come on, you know what? Let's not argue.
Leave that.
It's a tech hub.
Jordan's got nothing.
Exactly.
Leave that argument.
So the problem is, if we're a net food importer and you've got a strengthening US dollar and you've got food prices that are going up, then it's going to be a problem. That's the first. And you've got
a bad farming season.
Farming season. But what exacerbates our problem is we funded all these inputs. Right, so we printed money and we funded our command agriculture.
No, we didn't. It came from the private sector. The private sector banks funded. It is not called command anymore. It's called.
No, it's still called command agriculture. It's just now. It's guaranteed by government.
Agri something.
Whatever it is with CBZ, but it's still the same thing. But all that money that we printed, right, has gone to naught. That's the big problem, right? So that you're carrying through this natural inflation that almost all countries are carrying. Then you've got this bit where your old farmers have not been producing as much as they should, but you gave them inputs. 78% of our command agriculture farmers are not paying back their loans.
To be fair, Tinashe, that's an old number. We don't know what it will be this year.
Oh, you think it will be better?
Who knows?
Guess, please. How's it a guess?
I don't know.
Do you think we'll collect half the money this year?
Look, let's not keep throwing around old numbers. That's all I'm saying.
That was last season.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not that old.
It's a year ago.
Yeah, it's not that old.
Okay, anyway, yes.
Remember, the new numbers, we'll only get them in November. For this year, we'll only get those numbers in November.
And maybe they'll be better.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, yes.
Carry on. So the problem is all that money that we printed. So if you look at February 2019 up to February this year, we've printed 50 times of money.
Wait. Say that again.
So February 2019, when we introduced the Zim dollar officially, and you look at February 2022, for every dollar that was in the market in February 2019, today it's $50.
And how much did the economy grow by?
It's actually contracted by, according to the World Bank, by 16% over the same period.
Okay, so there was, let's say, $100 in the economy a year ago. So
3 years ago.
In February.
3 years ago.
There was $100 in the economy. That $100 became
50,000. Well, look, I actually...
well, hang on. So it became 5,000. But the number of things you could buy became 86.
Yes. Our output actually reduced. So this is This is...
Oh, and then the rate went from what to what?
And then the rate went from, let's call it 3.5 in February 2019 to now it's what? 600?
No, same period, same time period.
Yeah, same time period it would have been in February. What was the rate in February? 250, call it 250. So 100 times. Yeah.
That's scary.
It is scary. So in fact, and this is the point that perhaps we need to really emphasize is it could very well be true that today the government is not printing as much as they did a year ago. But there's just so much money in the economy that that money is still finding its way to a correct rate.
And there is no productivity. Because
production has actually gone backwards. So if you look at GDP in 2013 was actually 19 when you use today's real numbers. In 2013, it was 19 billion. Now it's probably around 15 billion.
I want to push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
Because if you look at the official numbers, and I suspect that's what you're making a reference to, from 19 billion to 15 billion, you know, it does look like the economy has shrunk significantly over the last few years. But you know, something remarkable has happened. If you look at corporate, you know, the formal sector, the big corporate players, we've always been trying to guess how big the informal sector is, how much money is out there in
we've had this argument
circulating in US dollars, right? And we haven't had a lot of good data to work with. But over the last few months, companies like Delta have reported their numbers, and they've actually grown their beverage volumes in real terms, and they're reporting that 60% of that revenue is in US dollars. So can a case not be made, you know, if you use Delta as a proxy for aggregate demand in our economy, as a proxy for GDP, that if they're selling more beverages, there's growth happening at some level?
Okay, so there are 3 points in which we can attack that argument. The first one is Delta in 2013 was not exporting any of its products. Now, a significant chunk of its volumes are actually export. So we get in the numbers.
But it's also got a significant chunk of imports.
Yeah, but it was always importing.
No, you know that they're importing super? They can't make enough chibuku.
Okay.
They bring chibuku from Zambia.
All right. If they're actually importing, then you're making the case that actually it's worse. They're worse off because an import is a subtraction of your GDP.
But they've made the demand is so big that they are actually bringing chibuku from another country.
Okay, but what we know is volumes for Delta have increased, but those volumes, part of those volumes are actually exports.
Yes.
Right?
I'm countering your point and saying, but there's also an increase in imports.
You're making a different point.
Their plants are pumping.
You're not countering, you're making a different point. And we will look at that different point as a separate point altogether. But that's number one. Number two is prices. That generally your volumes have increased, but your prices have actually come down. When you look at from 2013 to now.
That's actually a bad thing?
No, we're just trying to explain
why the volumes have gone up. So maybe aggregate demand hasn't gone up.
It's just
the spend is actually lower, but people are consuming more because it's cheaper. That's the
argument. Remember, we need to be very
but in US dollars, okay, I don't know about all other products, but in US dollars for a beer, I am paying about what I was paying at the time of the coup. That wasn't a coup.
No, we're looking at 2013. When you look at just general prices, Delta prices everywhere, right across, their prices have actually come down. Part of it has been the Zim dollar effect.
I think one or two people might want to challenge that, and looking forward to comments on Twitter and YouTube on this.
Yeah. So the other third point that I would make is that Delta, while Delta was a good proxy of GDP, perhaps maybe 20 years ago, not even 10 years ago, it's not a good proxy of GDP now, primarily because of the informal sector. We don't know what's happening with the informal sector.
Are you checking out the dogma of the show?
No, I'm just.
What's your new proxy?
No, my proxy has always been the official numbers. That has always been my proxy, because why we use the official numbers is so that we can track the changes. That I don't like. So if the World Bank tells me, like I've got my own numbers, but I never use my own numbers. But if the World Bank says,
I wouldn't use your numbers either.
Yeah, but they actually
wouldn't use your anything.
They're closer to the reality then. But I use official numbers because then we can track the changes. Because then we can compare like for like. So we can say, okay, the World Bank is saying the economy is X. Well, in 2013, the same World Bank said the economy was Y. What has changed? So those are the proxies that we use.
We've got to go to a break. You had 3 points. I think you're still on the second one.
No, it's on the third one.
I've made the third point.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
You're not keeping.
No, because you've just been all over the place. So we are in the doo-doo.
So if you're pushing back, I don't know why you're pushing back, because it's quite clear that our problems have nothing to do with what's actually happening at the moment globally. I think that's the point, the overarching point I wanted to make. That what you're seeing...
We were doing a great job of burning our own house.
Exactly.
The walls started.
Before some crazy arsonist came
lit up the globe.
A little bit of fire next door. Okay.
Exactly. It just exposes us greatly to the international vagaries, especially on the debt issue. I'm telling you, because we've got Afreximbank that we haven't even paid for a very long time.
Okay. Calm down. You're getting excited. Let's go for a break.
Perhaps have a shot in your tea.
Maybe drink less of that stuff.
Are you sure you want that?
And we'll be right back. Ooh, and we're back. You seem rather lubricated. You seem animated. I'm like the only rational person left on set. No more. Please don't pour that anymore.
Are you sure?
It's having a very terrible effect on you. So you point this gloomy picture about us burning our own house and so on. But right now we're talking about a condonation bill.
Yes.
So Mtuli's come out and said, Zvakarongeka surplus, but by the way, Zvakarongeka pacho, I was overspending.
More or less. So sad. I think we've seen the finance bill. It's called a Finance Bill Act. I'm not quite sure what number it is, but in essence, it's a condonation bill, and it's going back to 2019 and 2020. So for 2019, it's $6 billion, and for 2020...
Okay, sorry, can you just come back to the principle of a condonation?
Okay, so
that's
condonation,
a big word, you know?
Okay, so condonation just is asking for forgiveness. That I overspent this money beyond what you as Parliament said I must spend. Now I'm coming back and seeking forgiveness for overspending.
In other words, honey, she didn't mean anything.
I don't know whether that's an appropriate analogy.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But What it also just tells us that our laws, because this is really stemming from the Auditor General's report, a lot of it, where she went back to the line ministries and found out that they were actually spending a whole lot more money than what the minister had allocated. So that's where the differences started coming in. And so this is what we already know. It could actually be a whole lot more. And just looking at the amount of money that they printed.
Sorry, I mean, you say you don't trust Mthuli. Mthuli is coming back himself and saying, mea culpa, I spent more.
Would you trust him? Like I'm saying, the number 6 billion, and especially the 6 billion and the 100 billion, some of it you can actually work backwards.
Now you can go on to tell us about the 6 and the 100.
Okay, so 100 billion, if you lose, Rufaro, you're better at this. What was the rate in?
No, tell us what happened.
Okay, it just means it's over expenditure.
Yes, so what happened? So
Mthuli is coming back and saying, I overspent.
In what year? By how much?
6 billion in 2019 and 100 billion in 2020. Right? And 100 billion, if you want to contextualize, I think when we did the numbers, using a rate of around 38.40, comes to around $2.7 billion. And $2.7 billion, the budget for 2000 would have been about US $3 billion. 2020.
2020, yeah?
Yeah, the budget would have been around about $3 billion US.
Wait, I think to put it into proper context.
So we overspent.
So you sent your wife to the supermarket with $300.
Yeah.
And she spent 500 and something.
500, closer to 600. Yeah.
And then 2 years later, she comes and says, honey, I'm sorry.
No, 2 years later, your auditor, your accountant,
the bank manager or the accountant,
your accountant was doing the books and then realized that there was an overdraft that you were paying for.
And I didn't know.
You didn't know. Wow. I don't know whether you knew or not. Because in this case, you're Mthuli, right? So I don't know whether you knew or not. But essentially, that's exactly what happened.
And my wife puts up her hand and says, sorry, I got a bit carried away.
To put it into context how bad this is. So if you go back to the GNU era, when everything was dollarized, and we had a fiscally disciplined government that was only spending money that it actually collected, we had a budget of about $4 billion a year.
Yeah.
So how in a Zim dollar environment you're able to spend the equivalent of 2.7 billion more than you've announced is quite remarkable.
Well, I can tell you how it happens.
Wait. Where did the money come from?
It was printed.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I can tell you how it happens, right? Just on a very basic, straightforward fuel, for example. So all our taxes goes into one central account.
It's called the Consolidated Revenue Fund.
We know that account. But all our expenses, so they're the ones that are obvious, but they're ones
like that
payroll, right? But they're ones where we can get fuel at a fuel station. Now imagine if a particular somebody is continuously drawing down on their fuel.
But that's not going to come to
Who's keeping track?
That's not going to come to 2 billion.
If you look at all the line ministries and you look at Command Agriculture specifically, that's how you get there. Because actually for the fuel company, they love this, right? Because Mthuli came and said, you can only spend $10 on fuel. Then the line ministries are spending $30.
I'll tell you. If you talk about Command, okay, I'll gladly own up to having once been an accountant here. and I'll tell you where the magic happens, right?
Okay.
I don't know if that magic is the appropriate word, but
or creativity. So I call it creative accounting. Mm-hmm. So there's a capital account and there's a revenue account. Mm-hmm. Command goes on the capital account. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Command is not in the budget; it goes on the capital account. And as an accountant, things on the capital account, capex, is not an expense.
There you go.
It only becomes an expense. So if you buy a car, in accounting terms, it's not an expense. So if we're capitalizing farmers, it's not an expense. Or if we're lending farmers money, it's not an expense. It's a capital expenditure. Yeah. It only becomes an expense when we have to write off the debt. Or when it turns out that we overpaid for the car. We paid $500 for a car that is worth $300. The $200 becomes an expense. And that's how it then comes back
as a condonation
onto your revenue account and must be condoned, because it must be paid for.
Well, well done, George. At least we know EY was somewhat useful.
Are you getting paid for that?
You might owe us a bottle of whiskey.
I was going to give credit to my dad for that.
Your dad, not
my dad sent
EY.
me to university. So you got this condemnation. You've got inflation.
I think you've explained it very, very well. And that's why you then eventually, that's why we think the number is even way higher.
So the government is coming back tail between its legs saying we've overspent in 2019, 2020.
2020.
Why haven't they come back with 2021?
Because the Auditor General's report hasn't
Hasn't gone through 2020.
hasn't gone through.
Also,
So there could be some more bad news.
Also, they don't want to.
no.
There could be
it's
some bad news
definitely
in
the
Like
next 2
it's
years.
hard to
will be bad
imagine
news.
what billions of Zim dollars were worth in 2019. So if they tell us last year's numbers, you might have a heart attack.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody says 100 billion, today means absolutely nothing, right?
I think I have it in my pocket. Okay, now, so there's Mbuya Soko somewhere in rural Mrewa or Kuweta. What does this mean for Mbuya Soko? What must she do?
She's actually way ahead of the market, and she's simplified her life. She just wants cash, US dollar cash. That's it. She's simplified her life.
Well,
And I tend to agree with her.
well, what about?
And she's not giving her grain to GMB.
Or she's taken
But
up.
she's going to get arrested if she doesn't do that. She needs a permit.
She doesn't mind.
She needs a
Turns
permit
out-
not to give it to
Turns out she actually doesn't mind. She's not giving away her grain. She wants to be paid in US dollar, cash. She does not want any nostro or any of that sort. It has to be cash.
Okay.
Or she's taken up
furthermore-
stoicism and has accepted being poor.
Oh, okay. What about?
She's getting paid by the French.
Yes, you remember that show a year ago. Okay, what about Cynthia, who works for a local bank and earns a Zim dollar salary?
She's become very creative.
What does that mean? She's stealing?
Creative.
What must she do? What must she do? Because this thing is...
Oh, you're saying what must you do?
Yes.
I think that Zimbabweans have now understood that their savings accounts are worthless. So you're better off investing in your kids' education, buying land. I think land is still well prized relatively.
Yes,
I would say.
I understand the supplier stopped issuing new product.
Savings products. I think you need serious savings product. So spend as much as you can, spend as much Zim dollar as you can, spend it on your kids' education, because eventually they're going to leave the country. So that would take care of them, and buy land.
Okay, but I mean, that's like...
I actually
that's
think-
like
I-
a decent amount.
Okay,
go on.
I actually think we're in a transition towards dollarization, and
You think the world's always better?
no. Well, and you'll be surprised, Tinashe might agree with me on this, that the biggest defender of the Zim dollar, which is the issuer, recognizes all its challenges and is paying its staff significant US dollar allowances. So if you actually look at the average civil servant's pay and you compare the US dollar portion to the Zim dollar portion.
I saw a news article that suggested that the 100% increase of being offered translates to $36.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you and you compare that to what it was 3 years ago, 5 years, five years ago, what it tells you is that the government understands that the Zim dollar is not popular, has serious issues, and they have to compensate everybody. So they're doing this not just with civil servants, they're doing it to maize growers. They're saying, look, we're going to pay you X amount in US dollars, So I think begrudgingly,
We're re-dollarizing.
yeah, reality.
I think there's a caveat. So I agree, but I think that this time around it's a cash dollarization. It's not a formal dollarization.
But how can it not be formal if the government's doing it? If the government's paying its staff in dollars, if GMB is paying farmers in dollars.
What's actually happening is whatever is paid in dollars, people are just taking their money out of the banking
Formal
system,
banking system.
and keeping it as cash.
National Mattress Bank.
Yeah. So that's the difference. Because with a form of dollarization, then the RTGS dollar should be able to work efficiently. But I don't see that working.
You see, I think, so what it is...
If you look at cash box,
issue.
if you ask a lot of the bankers, right, they will tell you that, their cash boxes, what's actually in the cash box could perhaps be more.
They don't know what's in the cash box.
Yeah, but could perhaps
be
more.
As a former banker, I'm a former many things. As a former banker, I can tell you.
Be careful, former anchor. But yeah, I think it's going to be a cash society, more and more cash society than a formalized dollarization. That's going to be the major difference. I don't see the grandma, or what did you Soko in Murewa? Buya Soko banking her cash. Whereas during the GNU, she was quite happy banking her cash and getting an ATM card.
At least putting it on mobile money or whatever.
Yeah, mobile money, whatever it is. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, well, faith and confidence in the formal banking sector is being eroded on an ongoing basis. And it's very sad to see.
Yeah.
On that very down note, we must say goodbye. It's been lovely having you along. It's been lovely having a live audience. And they've been very well behaved, eh? Better than the one we had a couple of weeks ago. Have a lovely weekend. Take care. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.